allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening. Welcome to the April 2018 action meeting. Mr. Sugars, would you take roll, please?
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mrs. Judge?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Seidel?
Here.
Mrs. Scarpolino?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mr. Tomlinson?
Here.
Dr. Wong?
Here.
Dr. Dickinson?
Here. All right, first up, I think I'll turn it over to Dr. Malash to do a presentation this evening.
So, we have joining us tonight is Assemblywoman Pam Lampett. And Assemblywoman, if you would approach the microphone, we will start with you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
It's been a day. It's been a very exciting day. So, I'm very pleased to be here tonight for our superintendent, Dr. Joe Meloche. It's an honor and a privilege because I've known Joe for a very long time, and for many of you, you know, I'm a Cherry Hill parent. How are you? I'm a Cherry Hill parent. Both my kids went through the Cherry Hill school system. And when my son got to Cherry Hill West, it was Dr. Meloche as a principal who really helped him get through. He took a special interest. Andrew, you know, no surprise, Andrew was an ADHD child and made it through all the way through the Cherry Hill school system without an IEP. And it wasn't until his junior year that we sort of struggled about what to do. And Joe actually took me aside and said, look, it's a 504, Pam. This is what we're going to do. He's going to get a 504. And he had to explain to me what it meant and had to go through my first, IEP meeting. Oh, boy. He walked us through it. But it really was Joe taking my son aside and explaining to him, who is a really proud young man, very proud young man, that this was okay. This was not a crutch, because my son never wanted a crutch. And Joe took him aside and explained to him it wasn't. It was just an opportunity for him to take the exam and do as well as he could do. And I thank you for that. And it's to no surprise that Joe has been honored by many others. And so it was with pride that we wanted to present you with this resolution, a joint resolution tonight. So it's a joint resolution by Senator Beach, Assemblyman Greenwald, and myself. And there's many whereases, so and he's earned them. So whereas the Senate and General Assembly of the State of New Jersey are pleased to salute and commend Joe Meloche, a highly esteemed member of the Garden State community, in recognition of his inclusion in the upcoming Education Week 2018 edition of the Leaders to Learn From, and whereas Leaders to Learn From is a special report published annually by the prestigious magazine Education Week that highlights innovative school district leaders around the nation, exemplified by Dr. Joe Meloche. And whereas Dr. Joe Meloche has served with distinction as superintendent of the Cherry Hill Public Schools, a position he has aptly upheld since his fitting appointment on August 25, 2015. And the depth of his knowledge and the breadth of his experience have immeasurably enhanced the academic success and emotional growth of countless students. And whereas admitted graduate of DeSales University and Holy Family University and Widener University, Dr. Joe Meloche, a past principal of Kingston Elementary School, Carusi Middle School, Cherry Hill High School West, enjoyed a superb career as Cherry Hill's Director of Curriculum and later as the Assistant Superintendent for Pre-K through 12th grade. And whereas Dr. Joe Meloche lent his wisdom and expertise, an exceptional educator, sharing his considerable insight as a middle school humanities and English teacher in the Willingboro and Mapleshade school districts, where he has made significant contribution as the director of curriculum and the principal of the Steinhauer School. And whereas he has upheld in his life's efforts by his wife Anne there's always a woman behind a man, a good man, right? A saint, yes, exactly. And he takes great pride in his 4 daughters. And whereas within all of the spheres of his life and work, Dr. Joe Meloche has established a model to emulate and set a standard of excellence towards which others might strive. And whereas, and both right and proper for the legislature to pause in its deliberations and to recognize Dr. Joe Meloche and to praise him as his individual outstanding character and determination, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate and General Assembly of the State of New Jersey that the legislature hereby honors Dr. Joe Meloche and pays tribute to his meritorious record of service, leadership, and commitment, and extends sincere and best wishes for his continued success in all the future endeavors. And be it further resolved that the duly authenticated copy of this resolution, signed by the Senate President and the Assembly Speaker, and attested by the Senate Secretary and Assembly Clerk, be transmitted to Dr. Joe Meloche. Congratulations. And for his 4 daughters today, I just have to share that today the governor signed the Equal Pay Act. So in New Jersey, so for your 4 daughters, my daughter, all of our daughters, when they go off to work, hopefully they will not be discriminated against, but when they are, and that happens, and it will happen, New Jersey, the progressive state, has a look back to 6 years, the most progressive state in this nation. So very proud to be able to share that with all of you too.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
We're very lucky.
Very, very nice. Thank you.
No speech? Speechless. Wow.
I am speechless. I know.
How unusual. All right. So I guess we'll move on to the other presentation for the evening.
Yes.
Dr. Meloche or Mrs. Sugars.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dickinson. So I'm very excited. Mrs. Sugars is going to be doing a brief presentation, just to follow up, because we will ask the board to adopt our 2018-2019 annual budget. She did a full presentation earlier this month, and we're excited to get the update.
So I'm not quite sure how to top that. So this evening, we will have the public hearing on our budget. This budget is the same budget that you saw a couple weeks ago when we approved it for initial submission to the county office. The process is that we approve that initial submission budget. It gets submitted to the county office. The county office reviews it, comes back to us with any kind of questions or concerns that they may have. Fortunately, they came back to us with relatively few questions. And thank you to Mrs. Ridgway for taking the lead on that and answering all those questions. So basically, this is the same budget that you have seen. So I thought I would just highlight a few things. So what are we including in this budget that's new? We talked about this last time, an additional world language teacher at the middle school level, a Chinese language program at the high schools, B teams at the middle schools, and 5 additional full-time campus police officers. So those are the new things that we're including this year. What kind of capital projects are we doing this year? As you know, we try to do a couple projects each year through our capital reserve. Security upgrades at Woodcrest and Payne. As you know, we're having a roofing issue at East over the auditorium, so we will address that issue. And then we're going to continue wall repairs at East High School, which just seems to be kind of an ongoing project for us each year. So if you take a look here, we have our general fund expenditures and our general fund revenues. We're actually voting tonight on the general fund, the special revenue fund, and the debt service fund. But really, the general fund is kind of the meat and potatoes of our budget. It's the biggest part. It's where we do our day-to-day activities. And so you can see kind of a breakdown there of how we are spending our money. And this is the breakdown that the state uses. These are the categories that the state uses for our budget. And you can see that our general fund budget this year is just over $200 million. Look on the other side and you look at the revenue side, we can see that our local tax levy, if you take our local tax levy, our fund balance of just over $8 million and our capital reserve account, you can see that, you know, Cherry Hill itself is funding about 91% of its budget. We have some other smaller tuition revenues, miscellaneous revenues in there, some fund balance or federal aid in there. The next biggest part of our budget is state aid, and we received about $596,000 additional in general fund state aid this year over last year. So not where we'd like to be, but definitely moving in the right direction. So you can see there kind of how our revenue side looks in terms of who's supporting the budget and what that looks like. If we talk about tax impact, our taxes for the general fund are increasing just to the 2% cap. Then we have a slight increase in our debt service fund. It's about 2.5%. The overall amount is up 2.01%. And for the average assessed home in Cherry Hill of $224,000, it's about $82.12 annually for this budget. Some of the financial highlights, as I mentioned, we received some additional state aid of $596,000. We've received some additional debt service aid, which actually goes towards the payment of our debt, of $25,000. This is the last year for our bond and principal payment, which is why I have been talking. It is a very good year for a bond referendum. And also, through this budget, we will be generating some banked cap, which I think is a good thing as we look to full-day kindergarten and some other things that we know we will have coming up in future years. We will have some banked cap there to use if we should need it. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. As I said, the resolution is exactly the same. We will also vote on the special revenue fund. The special revenue fund is where we account for all of our grants. And the debt service fund is where we account for our bond and principal interest payments. So overall, when you add those three budgets together, it's just over $200 million, $245,467 for our total budget, with $175,752,928 supporting that out of local tax levy. Is there any questions? Yes, Mrs. Judge.
I don't really have a question. I just have a statement that I appreciate hiring rather than laying off, because I know through my buddies at Garden State Coalition of Schools, there are layoffs in the state, including Kingsway, what that I've heard at the fair funding testimony that we've heard, and Hillsborough is laying off some people. So I appreciate the hiring rather than the laying off of people. So it's well done.
And if there's no other comments, I just want to, again, publicly thank Mrs. Sugars and Mrs. Ridgway and their team for the work. Again, as we talked about before, this process begins around September each year. You know, so by the time this budget gets adopted tonight and then will finally get approved by the state, the ladies and their team will start to build the budget for next year, because we begin the formal process in September. So I'm incredibly grateful to the work that they've done and where we are able to stretch money and how we use it. So thank you for what you've done, and please carry that on back into the office.
Thank you, Mr. Sugars. All right, we'll move into our excuse me, correspondence. And I know Mrs. Judge has something for us this evening.
I do. It's rather lengthy, so I'll try to speed it up or gloss over. So last month's Garden State Coalition of Schools meeting, it's always the day after a meeting, so I'll report on last month and then mention a little bit about tomorrow. So on March 28th, the Garden State meeting, the guest speaker was Cynthia Rice. She's a senior policy analyst for an organization called Advocates for Children of New Jersey. She had a presentation, lasted like 20-30 minutes, on how Trenton Public Schools are improving their chronic absenteeism. They get more money than we do, for starters, but they have a lot of other issues for absenteeism, such as unreliable transportation. Parent and student work schedules impact their going to school, housing instability, etc. So I don't mean to make light of it at all. Trenton has offered incentives for attending school. They have many after-school activities. They held a father-daughter dance, just as a couple of examples, and they try very hard to make staff-student connections. And they've had a great turnaround with their absenteeism from 2015 to now. I have the PowerPoint presentation with me. I did not, grab the statistics or whatever. I could have, but I didn't. So tomorrow's meeting, on April 25th, the guest speaker is Dale Russakoff. She is the author of The Prize, and it's regarding Newark and public education in general. And she mentioned, in the review that I read that was forwarded to us at Garden State, Mark Zuckerberg is in the book for the $100 million pledge that he made years ago. So that'll be interesting to hear her tomorrow. And then the annual Garden State meeting is the morning of Wednesday, May 30th. It's in the morning. I know that Acting Commissioner Ropolet has been invited, and unfortunately Pam Lampett, she is the Assembly Education Committee Chair, she is unable to attend that day. I mentioned last month that the Garden State Board was meeting with Lou Greenwald regarding HIB and potential ideas regarding consequences and unintended consequences. We actually met with Lou's legislative director, Jennifer Lehman. She was actually at our fair funding meeting in February with Lou. We recommended a few things as executive board at Garden State, such as just as thoughts out there, to take away the HIB process at the elementary level up to the 4th grade, because a lot of the HIBs that are handled as HIBs are age-appropriate type behaviors that kids do, and it's just a suggestion. I don't have no idea if they're going to be able to make changes at the or if they will take these recommendations. And one of the suggestions was take away the appeal process that the board sits when appeals come to the Board of Education. Appeals would go to the superintendent, and then if parents are not happy with it, it would go directly to the Commissioner of Education if it's changed. Just a comment that was discussed. Another idea was to allow for mental health improvements in hiring and professional development, et cetera, above the 2% cap for districts. There were a few other suggestions. It'll be interesting to see what happens with these recommendations. And because we had the opportunity and Jennifer Lehman's ear, Dr. Jordan Schiff, who's the president of Garden State and superintendent of Hillsborough, spoke about the budget. He explained this school district's difficulty with the 2% cap, and they did not get any increase. Hillsborough, that's one reason why they're laying off. They did not get anything this year compared to last year. He ended up talking about the SFRA, aid, adjustment aid, et cetera, and Jennifer Lehman's response to Dr. Schiff's explanation, she said it was the best explanation she's ever received. So we kidded with him in the parking lot in Trenton afterward, and he was not very amused at that comment, which means that all the meetings that she sits in, he's not convinced that they're explaining very well or understanding the SFRA very well. So he didn't take it as the compliment that it was meant. He was more frustrated than anything. But we probably talked about the budget as long as we talked about HIB, and I think she gave us a little bit more than an hour. So it was unexpected that Lou wasn't there, but beneficial at the end. We'll see what happens with those recommendations and suggestions. Several of us went to the budget testimony hearings on Tuesday, April 3rd. Mrs. Matlack, Mrs. Seidel, and I went to Rowan University to testify before the Senate Budget Committee. Dr. Malash was there. Mrs. Scarpolino, Mrs. Schultz, and I also went to the Assembly hearing on the budget in Trenton on April 9th. At that hearing, I read Dr. Malash's testimony. I did the best I could. That 3 minutes goes fast. It was very frustrating, but they got all of our copies. Mrs. Scarpolino read our testimony that we worked on as a group at that meeting. It was very frustrating because when we registered, I don't know if you're going to talk about this at all, but yeah. Well, it was very frustrating because when we all signed up as board members, we were called at our homes or our cell phones, whatever number we gave, and said you're only allowed 5 minutes a group. And then when we got there, other people were allowed to speak. They didn't sign up. They didn't have testimony to hand in, but they were given time to speak. So we were just sitting there going, well, all of us would have, had we known. So it was interesting. Every year it's interesting. It's just very interesting. I'm glad we went. We will do our best, and we'll see if it makes a difference. 2 other things. I'll try to make it quick. I went on Friday, April 13th. I attended the school board's opioid epidemic conference at Mercer County Community College. It was a day, like 9 to 3 conference. These meetings are always very interesting, and I always walk away learning something. I met the youngest board member in New Jersey. The youngest board member in New Jersey, his name is Noah Horowitz, and he is from, I had to look it up, Brockburg, New Jersey, because on his name tag he had Noah. It was so funny. It was just Noah. So a few things I learned from this conference, takeaways that were highlights to me was talking about life stressors, that our brains can't tell the difference between life stressors and being chased by a lion. I remember that from previous, but I have a son who's in college, and I told him that. I said, next 2 weeks are going to be hard for him because he's final. So I told him about that. And another tidbit is, in the state of New Jersey, we could fill Lincoln Financial Field with the people we lost to the opioid addiction epidemic last year in 2017. Craziness. The DEA representative that spoke in the early afternoon said that they're seeing more and more, I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, carfentanil, which is 100 times more potent as the same amount of fentanyl, and 5,000 times more potent than a unit of heroin, and 10,000 times more potent than a unit of morphine. And he said, I could not verify this online, he said that it was meant for elephants. But I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he said. I can't imagine that he'd lie. He's a DEA representative, for God's sakes. But it just was, I couldn't find it online that that's true. So another little tidbit is they collected almost 15,000 pounds of medications at the Safe Drug Take-Back locations throughout the state last year. And he kept on referencing many times the DEA.gov regarding information for schools, parents, and kids, including YouTube. He mentioned there's a 45-minute and then there's an hour YouTube, interesting YouTube videos. Thank you. My goodness. That I have not watched yet, but I plan to, and I can forward you the names of them if you want. So the last thing I wanted to mention was last Tuesday, April 17th, I attended the Cherry Hill This Life Counts meeting that was held by the Jewish Family and Services in the Cherry Hill Police Department. It was at Mercer Street. More than anything, that evening was, I was so impressed with a young lady named Kristen Harutanen from Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. She had quite the life story and spoke to me because I have a brother who's in alcoholic recovering for 28 years, doing very well. But I went up and talked to her afterward because she is 3 years sober, and her life story is just sad, but she's going to be okay. I really do think she's going to be okay. So here's the packet that I got for you. There's some interesting information regarding apps for your phone. And then I gave everybody one of these just to tuck in your wallets and purse, whatever, and it's regarding if you know someone that's thinking about suicide, call 911. There's a text start to get messages. There's 800 numbers, and there's a New Jersey Hope Line number on this. So I got one for all the board members, and there's one in your folder. Yeah. So busy time. So thank you very much. Any questions? Talked way too long. Yes.
I just wanted to add that even though it was frustrating that we could not each individually testify, and that they did allow us to do a group testimony, but each of us who had signed up did get the opportunity to submit our own individual written testimony. So there was that, but it was frustrating. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Judge. Obviously a busy month. May I ask the age of the youngest board member in New Jersey?
He's a freshman in college. He is going to be he wants to be a math teacher. And it was just so intriguing to talk to him. I sat at the right table that day. It was I sat with a gentleman from West Orange. He's in his first term also. But this young man, we were talking about something or another, and we were talking about social media and the toughness of being a board member, being a volunteer in social media. And one of the things he said was, I don't think you can respond to that because you're a board member. And I said, he gets it. He got, So it was very interesting. It was very, very interesting. So, but he does have it was fun to sit with him. It was really fun to sit with him. Thanks.
Interesting. Okay, thank you again. And Mrs. Matlack, I know you have something to share with us.
Thank you. I do. I have 2 items that I attended along with Mrs. Judge. The first one we attended was on Wednesday, April 18th. It was the Camden County School Boards Association 8th grade dialogue night. It was a lot of fun. If you get a chance to go next year, you should. This is a program that recognizes students whose character, determination, school spirit, and leadership have inspired their classmates, teachers, and their community. Representing Rosa this year was Kyler Petrie. Representing Crucy was Caleb Williams, and representing Beck was Haley Connors. Each year, the students who represent our middle schools are more and more impressive. The format for the evening is a Q&A with all the students sitting on a stage facing the audience. Talk about intimidating. But our students, in fact, all the students were poised and thoughtful and articulate in their responses. One of the questions was, if you were an administrator in your school, what would you change? Haley from Beck said, there are a lot of different cultures in my school, and we should learn and celebrate all of them. Kyler from Rosa said, bring back recess. We need a break during the day. And Caleb from Carusi, he declined to answer at first, but then when the other kids had responded, he asked for the microphone back because he had given it some thought, and he said, teachers should have one-to-one interviews with their students to get to know them and to help them. And as we sat listening to these young students so thoughtfully consider the questions that were given to them and respond with suggestions for improvement from their perspective, I think our future is in pretty good hands. So if you have a chance to go next year, you should. And the other event that Mrs. Judge and I attended, and Dr. Malash was at both of these as well, was the Chaka Scholarship Luncheon. That's the Cherry Hill African American Civic Association. And this is the 37th year for their scholarships for qualifying East and West students. And students are chosen not only based on academic achievements, but on their character, work ethic, and community involvement. This year, Chaka proudly awarded 12 seniors from East and West with scholarships. From West, we had Kayla Washington, Jesse Randolph, Melanie Stokes, our own Gay Brown, Chisholm Achinivu, and Aaron Faust. And from East, we had Juliet Ogery, Devin Holmes, Danielle Allen, Joshua Hall, Maya Williams, and Jonathan Andrade. Cherry Hill African American Civic Association also recognized 3 members of our faculty and administration with their Flame Award for their contribution and dedication to our students and to the Civic Association. The Flame awardees were Michelle Pryor, who is a guidance counselor at West, Dr. Lawyer Chapman, who is here tonight, principal of our alternative high school, and Dr. Joseph Malash, our superintendent. And another great event sponsored by the Chaka members who are very dedicated to our students in many respects. So if you have a chance to go to that one next year, I encourage you to do so. It's a lot of fun, and it's great to meet those kids. They're incredible. Thank you.
Any questions for Mrs. Matlack? Any other correspondence? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our high school board reps. And I guess this evening we'll start with West.
Good evening, Dr. Malash, Dr. Dickinson, Mr. Goodwin, members of the Board of Education, and stakeholders. I hope everyone enjoyed their spring break. As a senior, this is an exciting time. Fourth marking period is here, and it is officially time to count down to graduation. It is an exciting time because graduation marks the beginning of a new life with endless possibilities. Despite the fact the school year is coming to an end, there are still several events this month. On April 13th, the African American Culture Club had their Washington, D.C. field trip. The trip encompassed visiting the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the MLK Monument, and Howard University. The cherry blossoms were in bloom, and it was a beautiful day for a field trip. Students that have demonstrated academic excellence through their GPA were inducted into the National Honor Society. Inductions were held in the auditorium on April 16th at 7 p.m. The class of 2018's senior trip was from April 17th to April 21st. I was in attendance of the trip. Even though I am still recovering from the late nights and hot weather, I would do it all again. Students that participate in the choir and various West singing groups will be performing at Myrtle Beach from April 26th to April 29th. From April 23rd to April 27th, tickets for senior prom will be available for sale in F30 during the lunch periods. The prom will be on May 31st at the Adventure Aquarium from 7 to 11 p.m. On May 1st and May 3rd, the senior parent meeting will be held in the auditorium at 6 p.m. During the meeting, the graduation ceremony, rehearsals, final obligations, and exams will be discussed. Juniors will have their senior portraits taken on May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Cherry Hill West 2018 Rapid Yearbook are now on sale for $85. This concludes my April report, and I hope everyone has a productive week. Thank you.
Thank you, Gay. You now hear from East.
Hello, esteemed members of the board. It's good to see you again. Although it has only been 1 month since my last report, I have quite a bit to talk about, so I'll try to keep this brief. At the last meeting, I noted the upcoming event, Mr. East. I'm pleased to report that it went very smoothly, raised a lot of money for this year's charity, Tools for Schools, and our very own Josh Sadikoff came in second place. The Thursday before spring break, we held our annual Multicultural Day. Members of our wide variety of cultural organizations demonstrated the most interesting aspects of their heritage through booths, activities, and an organized dance. Members of these clubs worked for months to get everything together, and their hard work really paid off as it was a memorable day for all. Stay tuned, the a cappella group advanced to the high school national championships. The finals were held on Friday, April 20th. They had a phenomenal season, and making it to the national championships was a great way to end it. On Wednesday, April 18th, during park testing, the senior class student government hosted a field day for the seniors. There were bouncy castles, food trucks, and games such as kickball, can jam, and cornhole. It was a nice way to spend a sunny day, and there was even a dunk tank. On Saturday, April 21st, East hosted Simon's Heart Organization and offered free heart screenings. 170 people were screened, and 5 referrals were made from that. East currently has 20 students in Atlanta for DECA Nationals. They've been working hard all year, and we're excited to see what they accomplish. Spring sports are in full swing, with sports such as the track and field teams, lacrosse, and baseball having some big wins under their belts already. We look forward to seeing how the rest of the season plays out. The junior prom will be this Friday. The class of 2019 is looking forward to a memorable night of dinner and dancing. On May 1st, there will be a band concert. There's always so much talent displayed at the spring concert, and I encourage you all to come out and see it. On May 11th, the theater department will be hosting one-act plays. Students come together to write, cast, and direct their own plays as part of the final major theater activity of the year. East has a couple award ceremonies coming up with People's Choice Awards on May 15th and cum laude inductions on May 16th. And last but not least, the Robotics Club has 3 teams leaving tomorrow for Worlds in Louisville, Kentucky. We're very proud of them and can't wait to hear how they do. Thank you for giving me the time to update you. Any questions?
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you both. Very good reports. I'm sure it's a very busy time as you close down to the end of the school year. Okay, so we'll have our first public discussion period. Your comments must be regarding items on tonight's action agenda. When you come to the mic, please state your name and address and the item to which you will be speaking on the agenda. You'll have 3 minutes for your remarks. Please note the green light will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining. The light will turn red when your 3 minutes are up.
Hi, Jennifer Nadio, 224 North Madison Avenue, Cherry Hill, and I'm talking on 5561, use of physical restraint and seclusion techniques for students with disabilities. Dr. Malash and Mrs. Wethington and Mrs. Scarpolino explained that at the last P&L meeting that the BOE is the parent voice, and that we, the parents and advocates, have elected you to speak for us, and that CHSEPTA has to come to every meeting to express our concerns. I saw that within the physical restraints and seclusion, some of our suggestions have arrived in there, and we're very happy to see that. But we're praying that you'll also help us with a couple other things that we have. 2 days after I attended the meeting on April 10th to discuss seclusion and physical restraint techniques for students with disabilities, I received phone calls and emails from parents alleging excessive restraint in a few special needs classrooms in district. CHSEPTA sent a letter to Dr. Malash, Mrs. Wethington, Dr. Campisi, and Dr. Dickinson, and Dr. Malash has confirmed in person that an investigation is in progress. So thank you for that. As a parent of a student who has received physical restraint and seclusion both in and out of Cherry Hill School District, I'm very familiar with physical restraint and seclusion techniques. I am happy and thankful that those two pieces, the seclusion and the prone restraint, have been added back in. And I believe that because I believe that everything should be covered in a policy to protect the teachers, the students, and the administration. I would also like to note that nowhere in this policy does it discuss counseling for PTSD, stress, and trauma due to these techniques. It also does not comment on having students receive a functional behavior analysis when more than one restraint is completed. Parents and school district employees should be recommending a functional behavior assessment in their IEPs or 504s to get to the bottom of the behaviors. I also believe a functional communication assessment should also be conducted because we all know aggression can be a form of communication and could be why the child is being aggressive. Being restrained, giving a timeout, or seclusion won't get to the bottom of what is bothering the person. I believe we also need to start noting how many restraints are recurring in and out of district. We also truly believe that the district needs a new safety training program, and it's stated in number 3 that the Board of Ed is supposed to determine who is to be qualified to provide such training and that the training is updated at least annually. I have heard from several BCBAs and they're recommending Safety Care Behavioral Safety Training Program, which provides the skills and competencies necessary to effectively prevent, minimize, and manage behavioral challenges with dignity, safety, and the possibility of change. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Nadio, can you send me that? Or share with me what you just read?
What do you mean? Like, you want me to send you my email?
Please.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're so welcome.
Hi, I'm Eileen Doran, 47 Bryn Mawr Avenue, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I'm also speaking on 5561. Originally, I was going to speak about having the prone restraint and seclusion language put back in to protect our out-of-district students, which Ms. Nadia, I know, spoke about us on the live stream at the last meeting. And I'm very happy to see that the board and the policy committee took CHSEPTA's and Ms. Nadia's recommendations and applied them. That's really heartening to see. Thank you so much for doing that. Likewise, to what Ms. Nadia said, I'm concerned about the number of times children are being restrained in the district in certain classrooms, and the follow-up for that, or that someone should be reviewing that the parents are being notified every time in a timely manner. And that if, as it says in the policy, it says, if there's repeated use of these methods for one individual child, or within the same classroom, or by the same person, that there should be some kind of a follow-up, a review, to see what needs to happen. Does the child need an FBA? Does the teacher need more training? Is there something inadvertent that's happening in the classroom climate that's setting the child off? Not intentionally by anyone, but what's happening? Let's take a look and see how we can prevent it. So that this stays what I think we all intended to be, which is a measure of last resort, that we would use all sorts of other positive methods first. And then, as Ms. Nadio said, if, as a last resort, this is what needs to happen to keep everyone safe, the student and the staff and the other students in the class, that there be some kind of debriefing afterwards, some counseling, whether it's a guidance counselor. We have amazing, this is something we do really well in our district, I'm very proud of, is the mental health services we have. So maybe there's ways to tap those folks in afterwards to help our students who have had to go through this process. So thank you for listening, and I hope you take some of those things into consideration.
Good evening. David Rossi, 102 Roanoke Road. Be commenting on item number 4, project 8130, security upgrades. I'm going to read a statement from Jen Brombaugh. She's unable to be here this evening, so I would do this for her. I want to talk to you about security as it relates to the budget being approved tonight. During the many recent meetings and presentations touching on security, Dr. Malash and others have referenced a security consultant that has advised on a wide range of plans, from small security upgrades all the way up to $14 million in vestibule construction included in upcoming bond. A week or two ago, I asked to see a copy of the recommendations made by the unnamed security consultant. I was surprised when Dr. Malash explained that to date, Cherry Hill has not had a comprehensive audit done by a professional security firm, 5 years after Sandy Hook, 19 years after Columbine, before current Cherry Hill students were even born. In 2018, Cherry Hill has never had a security audit done. This begs many difficult questions. Why did we move forward with $200,000 security upgrades to Barclay School with no security audit? Why is the board passing a budget spending over $1 million in capital reserves to fund security upgrades at only Woodcrest and Payne Elementary schools with no security audit? Why are you asking taxpayers to approve $14 million in bonds to construct security vestibules with no security audit? I appreciate all of the contributions of Mrs. Sugars, Ms. Ciparito, and the Board of Education members, the Cherry Hill Police Department, architects, and others in developing and coordinating security upgrades. As Dr. Malash explained, Mrs. Sugars worked on the project with Ronan Security when she worked in Morristown School District. She took what she learned there during that project and applied it to Cherry Hill schools, but she is not a security specialist, nor are the Cherry Hill Police Department. They are law enforcement and first responders with their own perspective. Just last week at 11th hour, Cherry Hill contracted with Ronan Security to finally perform security audit. Cherry Hill students deserve better than hand-me-down security plans. They deserve a professionally planned and executed security plan like Morristown. They deserve fiscal responsibility and evidence-based decision-making and further execution of security upgrades should be put on hold pending completion of a security audit by Ronan Security. The formation of a district-wide committee with community representation and public review of Ronan Security and recommendations. I also wanted to echo the statements that the other two community members spoke about the policies dealing with children with special needs and how it relates to the discussions that they had and the concerns that they have. It is one of mine as well, and I will discuss that at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Good evening, board. My name is Rick Short. My address is 1002 Chelton Parkway. Tonight I'm just going to focus on 3 numbers, folks, and these are the numbers that all our 11,300 students rely on. The 3 numbers are this. We have 47% coverage of police, police, which is good. The problem is we only have 16% coverage of physical security. This concerns me dearly. This affects over 10,242 students who fall under the realm of what I consider no physical security. I want to read you tonight some principal letters after events. The second one I will read is the second Beck incident, probably the most, for me, the most emotional one, because it had to do with a helicopter and everything else. So I read you some of the quotes exactly from the principal letter. The first one was the first Beck incident in October 2016, when the principal said, "Clown-like appearance, therefore suspicious scene." What was the result? I know what the result was. It was one camera in the entire school, which is completely, to me, absurd. What was the result? The real result? The Philadelphia Police Department, the Cherry Hill Police Department investigated the matter and found no credible threat. How can you find any credible threat when you have one camera in the entire school? This is completely absurd. The second letter, coming from the Beck. This time, the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office gets involved. The Cherry Hill Police gets involved. They investigated a threat. This is really the most concerning, because in the state of New Jersey, there's over 3,000 schools. Of the 3,000 schools, somehow or another, we were picked out of the blue to be the one with a bomb threat. Now, if this were a real bomb threat, how would we know where the person is or where the device is? Wouldn't you think that during the first moments of any major event, that if we had live feed cameras in all 19 schools starting September 1st, our 11,300 students would be safer? Let's move on to the next one that just happened, Bret Hart, April 11th. Same scenario. How can the police investigate anything if they don't have any physical security? I end with this. The cost, well, first of all, I'm asking you not to approve the budget, because you need to add 0.001 amount of money to even lease to cover all 18 schools. That's all it's going to cost. Thank you.
Hello, I'd like to speak. I'm Ed Mackhouse. I'm 2144 Lincolnshire Road, Furlong, PA. I attended a couple meetings prior to Cherry Hill. I tend to...
Mr. Mackhouse, can I ask which agenda item you're speaking to?
I'm going to talk about security. The comments here...
We need a specific agenda item. You can speak in the second public comment period if you would like.
Oh, I was referring to, like other people said, how you implement the restraints, the judgments that's involved. I've experienced 10 years as a teacher, and I've gone to other school board meetings. I've seen, like at Cheltenham, where there was 10 people injured trying to restrain and stop some fights. I've experienced stopping fights, and I think a lot of teachers are intimidated. They're told they're afraid to get involved, and a lot of things get out of hand because of that.
I'm going to ask you to speak during a second public comment period, because this is a little bit beyond the specific agenda items. You may speak, but you have to wait for the second period.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Before I turn it over to Dr. Malash, I have some remarks that I'd like to share with everybody. these are kind of meandering, but you'll see where I'm going towards the end, so bear with me. I think sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. You know, we constantly talk about potholes and broken windows and things, but there's, you know, a pretty elaborate organization that we're all in charge of. And I'll share some facts with you. We're in charge of 19 buildings. The youngest of our building was built in 1970. And I was a little lad back then. We're responsible for 1.7 million square feet of building space, 354 acres of grounds. There are 1,650 total employees, including over 1,000 teachers and other certificated staff, one of the largest employers in this region. We're responsible for the success of over 11,000 students. It's a very complex organization, and it's very successful. Just some success indicators: 94% of our graduates continue their education. We're a state district of character, and 8 individual schools have been recognized as national schools of character. We're the 12th or 13th largest school district in the state of New Jersey, 12th largest district out of 590 total districts. All of these moving parts continue to operate even though we are severely underfunded by the state of New Jersey. Our district receives less than half of the annual state aid that the state itself says we deserve. And the next part doesn't have a lot of whereases and ands and therefore, so a little bit easier to read. Even with inadequate resources, our district thrives. It would be impossible to manage this organization without strong leadership. Leadership starts at the top. And we are extremely fortunate to have Superintendent Dr. Joseph Malach epitomize leadership. Dr. Malach was recently recognized as one of Education Week's 2018 Leaders to Learn From. Not proper grammar, but nonetheless, an important recognition. He was selected from hundreds of nominations from across the nation due to his innovative leadership practices. This culminated in a special recognition event in early April in Washington, D.C. Dr. Malach was also recognized as the New Jersey PTA Superintendent of the Year this month. I and the Cherry Hill Board of Education would like to congratulate Dr. Malach on his achievements and share our appreciation for all the hard work he contributes to the success of the district. We are fortunate to have him leading our school district. Congratulations. Now you may have your speech.
Wow. Again, I typically am not at a loss for words, but thank you, Barry. Thank you very much, and thank you to the board. I do consider myself one of the luckiest people in the world, you know, to have the position that I have, and to live and to work in the community in which I live and work, and the opportunity to raise my children and have them attend this school district. You know, I'm a very proud graduate of the Cherry Hill Public Schools. I'm thrilled that 2 of my girls have graduated. I have one that'll graduate, you know, with the young ladies, you know, just 2 months from now, you know, and then the 4th who, in a couple of years, hopefully, you know, will continue on track to graduate as well. I'm very fortunate to do what I do and to work with the people. You know, there's a lot of, you know, as a school district and as a community, there are a lot of external validators and accolades that come through. You know, typically I get to be the big shiny head in the front, but it's based on the work of, you know, all of those people, the 1,650 people that you talked about, and really built on the success of the 11,000 plus kids that are here. I will always contend in the meetings, and I do the community meetings, go around and talk with folks. The greatest resource that we have in Cherry Hill truly is the human resource. You know, it's the folks that are here in our buildings, that are in our district. It's the, you know, it's the buildings and grounds guys that are in the back of the building doing work right now that have been here all day. You know, it's the cleaners, it's the nurses, the counselors, it's the folks sitting at the side table, you as board members. You know, and that's just half of the story. The other half is we get some really good kids that come from some incredible families. Cherry Hill is not always, for a lot of people, the easiest place to work. There are challenges that are inherent in our community because folks have high expectations. And unfortunately, not everybody wants to live up to high expectations. I'm about continuing to raise that bar, and push the expectations and to talk about it. One of the things that we see, and we've talked a lot over the last couple of years about civil discourse, is folks, unfortunately, right now don't all know how to disagree. And it's okay to disagree. If we all got along and agreed on everything all the time, it would be a pretty boring world, and we would never, ever improve. But there's a way to disagree, and there's a way to have a difference of opinions, in how we share those things. So I do, consider myself incredibly fortunate. The opportunity I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago. And Dr. Mahan was there, and Dr. Chapman, who's here tonight, and some other folks. But to have the opportunity to sit on a stage and to talk about the good works that are going on in Cherry Hill, between people from around the country. There's a gentleman from Egypt that came up and was there and wanted to talk. We've been in communication about the work that we are doing. It's incredible. Beyond the fact that we were in the Mayflower Hotel where they've had the inaugural balls, and I literally sat on the stage where President Kennedy stood with his wife when he was inaugurated. I mean, it's just an incredible experience. And I'll tie into the fact that April is going by incredibly quickly. And you figure the first week of April, we were on spring break. This is literally just the third week of the month, in terms of what's going on that we've been in school. And this is an exciting time of year. I do believe that the academic year picks up pace, after we hit January 1st. And certainly when we return from spring break, it goes lightning fast. I'm grateful to Lauren and to Gay, for them continuing to share, about the good works that are going on in the high schools. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of weeks to visit a lot of the schools. I was at both East and West today. I had the opportunity to talk to some kids and talk to some staff members, and it just is exciting times. There is a lot to celebrate about the successes that go on, and we see those celebrations. I was thrilled to be at the African American Civic Association luncheon, and sharing a couple of words at the luncheon the other day. The Cherry Hill African American Civic Association is a model for so many other civic groups. 37 years that they've awarded scholarships to children from Cherry Hill. It's an incredible legacy, as I said, that they have presented to the future. I've started to meet with the Cherry Hill Hispanic Civic Association that is just forming. I have the opportunity to meet with the Cherry Hill Special Ed PTA. We have advocacy groups that continue to grow and continue to come out to speak on behalf of the children and the families that are here. They are truly the greatest resource, and we as administrators and as board members, always have to have that in our minds of what we're doing, and who we are. And I appreciate the ladies, and then there's members of the community that also testified, at the Senate and Assembly hearings, about the budget. And Dr. Dickinson, you shared your words about the challenges that we have. School funding in New Jersey is an incredibly challenging thing. We continue to advocate and continue to fight. Missy Lang from the Cherry Hill Fair Funding Group was in Trenton on Monday, as part of a press conference that was held. We will continue to advocate. Some of us met with members of town council and the mayor, to talk about the issue last evening. It's an ongoing discussion, and one that we will continue to push forward. I always believe that in pushing forward, especially as a community, we are better doing that together, than divided. So again, I appreciate the work of the board members, the work of the folks in the community, and students even that have been involved in terms of what's going on. A couple of other highlights, and there's been some press in the last 24 hours, which is intriguing to me. Our campus police officers, the 4 campus police officers that we have, 2 at each of the high schools, were armed for the first time yesterday. In the nearly 35 years the campus police have existed here in Cherry Hill. The 4 gentlemen that are currently our campus police officers, the same guys that were there a week ago, and being in both of the high schools, there has been some notice, but again, the folks know them, the kids know them, the staff know these guys, and who we are. As part of the budget that we'll ask you to approve tonight, is also the approval of 5 additional campus police officers for the 2018-2019 academic year. And again, I'm grateful to the work of Mr. Green, Mrs. Sugars and Miss Adrian that they've done to move this forward, and our Director of Security, Mr. Saporito, who is sitting in the back. The transcendent work that's been done over the course of the last 2 months, really has made an impact on our district. As we talk about our budgets, we talk about referendum items, as we talk about the transition during the month of March, as the board adopted revised policy, arming campus police officers is a tremendous change. So when we get back in September, we expect to have 10 employees who will be armed in our district, including Mr. Saporito as our District Director of Security. That's a significant change. And as we've gone through and we've talked to folks about doing it, the campus police officers will work for us. We believe it's incredibly important that they are part of the school district and that they work for us. So that the work that Dr. Chapman and Mr. Guy and the members of the Character Ed, Cultural Proficiency, and Equity Committee have been doing, that work continues with campus police officers. Working with our children is a very important thing, and it's different than riding in a car and being on the street and what the work goes through. These campus police officers are folks who are all qualified. They've all been through the training. They all are appropriately licensed. They all qualify in terms of what they have to do. But it's a significant change for our district. And it's one through discussion that we have had moving forward we'll do in a positive manner. Looking forward to the interview process as we have posted those jobs, and where we're going to be. Mrs. Judge, you pointed out that in our budget, we have continued to add positions, and again, to the work and the thanks to Mrs. Sugars and Mrs. Ridgway and their folks as we look at our monies and really manage who we are and what we're doing. The most important resource that we have are the staff that work for us. We know that the most significant impact that we can provide for a child in terms of their experience and their learning opportunities is the relationship that exists between the staff member and the child, between that teacher and the child sitting in the classroom. We continue to focus on that and will continue to focus on that. That's a choice that the Cherry Hill School District historically has made, and one that we will continue to make moving forward. I will encourage folks to continue to come out. We're ongoing with our community conversations. We have the opportunity typically in small groups to talk about the referendum items, and we eagerly are anticipating receiving response from the state in June, so we can come forward and talk more specifically about the questions, about what it is that we intend to do. Again, there are going to be differences of opinion about how we spend money and what we choose to do. One of the things as we continue to talk with folks in the community is we can agree we all want kids to be safe and we all want kids to learn. How we're going to do that and what that looks like is something we'll continue to discuss. So thanks. And ladies, thank you. Enjoy the next 2 months, right? So y'all will be back in May for the meetings, and you finish up in May, we transition, right? So enjoy the next 2 months in terms of what's going on, all right?
Thank you, Dr. Malash. All right, we'll move into our action agenda. Get some business done. Mrs. Seidel, would you move the C&I agenda, please?
Sure will. Thank you, Dr. Dickinson. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2017-2018 school year. Number 2, approval of out-of-district placements for the 2017-2018 school year. Number 3, approval of middle school supplemental literature books for the 2018-2019 school year. Number 4, approval of middle school summer reading books for the 2018-2019 school year. Number 5, approval of high school summer PSAT, SAT, ACT, college essay summer program. And number 6, you have a yellow sheet in front of you, approval of special education settlement agreement. Do I have a second? Mrs. Judge, any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes to all.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Judge,
Yes to all.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Yes to all.
Dr. Wong,
Yes.
Dr. Dickinson.
Yes to all. Mr. Goodwin, would you move B and F, please?
Yes, I will, Dr. Dickinson. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. 1, financial reports. 2, adoption of the 2018-2019 budget. 3, maximum travel expenditure. 4, motion to approve use of capital reserve to fund approved projects for the 2018-2019 school year. 5, resolution for approval of contract for the Bennett Card Services, LLC. 6, resolution for approval of contract with Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield. And 7, resolution for the award of change orders. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack, are there any questions? Mrs. Scarpolino.
I have a question on item 4, project 8130 on the vestibules for Payne and Woodcrest. I was curious. I know bulletproof glass is just ridiculously expensive and cost prohibitive, but I was wondering, I've learned of material or something, some kind of product that can be applied to glass that makes it more difficult to shatter. It will ultimately shatter, but it would slow things down. And I didn't know if that's going to be part of the project or something we've considered or priced out. So I just wanted some information on that.
It's something, we talked about when we did the Barclay project, and it's something that we'll talk about again as we look at this project. I think there is a product, it's a 3M product that can go on the windows. Currently, right now, we have to use safety glass, and safety glass shatters so that people don't get hurt from it. Obviously, if it were to be shot at, it would shatter unless this film does not prevent the bullets from going through, but it can slow the process down. So, my intent was to talk about that again, bring that subject up again. I think the concern is, do you stop at the vestibule? Do you extend it to other windows? Those are things that you have to think about and talk about. But I know that we'll go into the planning phase for the vestibules now that we, in a few minutes, hopefully, if we approve the budget. Those discussions will be ongoing, probably in upcoming committee meetings about what that looks like and if we should consider that or not.
When you say we're required to use the glass that shatters,
we are required to use safety glass.
Safety glass.
Yes.
So would we be able to even use it? Like, is there a question of whether we can even use a material like that if it's?
We could. We could not use bulletproof glass though because that is not shatterproof. So. Yes.
Probably couldn't use that for
right.
a lot of reasons.
And it's cost prohibitive, as you said. But yes, we could certainly take a look, at this alternate product.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, Mrs. Sugars.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes.
Mrs. Judge.
I need to abstain on the bill list regarding the Cooper Health System. Yes to the remainder.
Mrs. Matlack.
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel.
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino.
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz.
I need to abstain to Bayauto Home Health on the bill list. Yes to the rest.
Mr. Tomlinson.
Abstaining from Bancroft NeuroHealth on the bill list. Yes to the remainder.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Dr. Dickinson.
Yes to all. Mrs. Judge, would you move the HR agenda, please?
Yes, I will wake up over here and read Human Resources. Thank you very much. So the superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointment certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, contract renewals certificated. Number 6, contract renewals non-certificated. Number 7, leaves of absence certificated. Number 8, leaves of absence non-certificated. Number 9, assignment salary change certificated. And number 10, other compensation certificated. Do I have a second? Mrs. Seidel. Any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Judge.
Yes to all.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack.
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel.
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino.
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson.
Yes to all.
Dr. Wong.
I need to abstain from the number 3 involving Rowan University. Yes to the rest.
Dr. Dickinson.
Yes to all. Mrs. Scarpolino, would you move P&L, please?
Certainly. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, first reading of policy. Number 2, second reading of policies. Number 3, waiver of regulation 2340 field trips. Number 4, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying, investigation decisions. Do I have a second? Mrs. Judge, are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars?
Mrs. Scarpolino.
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes.
Mrs. Judge.
Yes to all.
Mrs. Matlack.
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel.
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson.
I need to abstain from number 4 for investigation 4575, but yes to the remainder.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Dr. Dickinson.
Yes to all. All right, we have no strategic planning items this evening, so we'll move into our second public discussion. You may now comment on any issue. When you come to the mic, please state your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes for your remarks.
My name's Ed Mackhouse again, 2144 Lincolnshire Road, Furlong, PA 18925. I taught for 10 years. I was in New York City, and I taught in Camden, New Jersey, and I have a lot of experience with difficulties and students with a lot of difficulties, and I taught in the 70s, and I've seen how the system has deteriorated, and teachers are intimidated and afraid to do necessary restraints on students, and are, for example, in Cheltenham, where it was 10 breaking up a fight of 4 girls actually, 10 teachers and administrators were injured, and I commend that you are arming some security people, so you've significantly increased your effectiveness of your security in the school, because thousands of people had cell phones in Parkland, and that didn't do them any good. And then as far as security procedures, someone commented, well, there's how many times did people complain? There was 100 complaints, 35 documented on crews in Parkland, and the school board was, director there was commended and invited to the White House and congratulated on how he cut down the statistics. And they did say they were discriminating against minorities, and so they didn't incarcerate crews or commit him, so they could take his guns away. So the solution where the NRA arming people with guns has saved 1 million lives every year. The people that decimated or threatened and attacked. So to get respect, you can't fool the students. If they see the gun is put to the head of these girls, a lot of girls were intimidated, like at least 35 documented, and they didn't do anything about it. And they're saying, well, you should report all these things. If you report things, like I'm from Pennsylvania, we're not a gun control state. Like I was born in Camden, New Jersey, and like in Chicago, where witnesses are killed and intimidated because you can't legally defend yourself on the streets. So 150 people shot in Chicago, and people are afraid to speak up. So I think arming teachers and allowing teachers to be armed is a necessary procedure, and you should go to that and rehire Mr. Locke, who is willing to do that. Very few teachers are willing to take the responsibility. Even my daughter, who's a counselor, she says, well, we need special training and all, but someone who has military training and all, secret line, why concealed carry is so good is because, as the Voice of America, we had armed guards who were killed, but they wouldn't have any backup. So all the people in the church in Pakistan were killed. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good evening again. David Rossi, 102 Roanoke Road. On the vestibule glass, I find if we're unable to use either bulletproof glass or use some 3M product to make them bullet resistant, I'm not really sure, other than managing the flow of people who come in, general traffic, what really the effectiveness is of an overall security plan. Pleased to see that the app Stop It is on the way of being rolled out. I think that could be a useful tool for students to anonymously report. I appreciate everyone's work on getting that moving. I know there was some delays, but wanted to acknowledge that. I am not for arming teachers in the classroom. So prior to the Florida incident, there were Cherry Hill Police Department in and out of the schools on a regular basis, like they had been for years. And during the BOE meeting, you may remember it was loud and ruckus, the very large one after that incident. I remember that the mayor came in, and I guess his duties to quell the angry mob, which he did effectively. I think people felt very assured that there was going to be some cohesive effort, and he had stated that if it's a matter of cost, we'll put police in there in the schools more frequently. believe it was Dr. Malash, you had stated we will have increased presence in the schools, and we saw that. And I believe that Dr. Malash had mentioned that they would be increased presence throughout the rest of the year. And now we're looking at arming the resource officers, albeit the ones that have been there and have relationships with the students, the faculty, and the staff. I think we really need to take into consideration two segments of our community. One, the special needs community, the parents and the children. How are we going to know that the security resource officers are going to be trained specifically on how to engage if there is a threat? How are they going to deal differently with the special needs community, because they do have different needs and they react differently to things. We have some students that are sensory impaired and so on. So I think we really need to talk openly and discuss a plan for that. Also, we have the minority community. The Cherry Hill Police Department are built into the fabric of our community, and they have extensive training on cultural sensitivity, and I think that we really need to look at those concerns from the community and how are we going to be assured that we're addressing their concerns with all the others that have been mentioned. Personally, I'm not really sure about guns in the school at this point from a security officer standpoint. I'm really not even sure if armed police officers are a great answer for our school. But the fact that we're having this conversation and, you know, hopefully these things will be addressed and as we continue to move forward into next year. And thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Short. Remember, I'm standing in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I could not be standing in front of right now the Mount Laurel School Board because I can't find any problems with the entire security, and I've looked hard. It's pretty pathetic that it's been 14 days. I stood here 14 days ago talking to you all about cameras broken in Cherry Hill East. Has anything been fixed? No. So let me go into more detail. The one camera I'm talking about doesn't even have an interior. How could a principal not even know that cameras aren't working? And then the other camera is facing downward towards the tennis courts. That one is broken too, obviously. It just behooves me that this can continue. This is not a pothole in front of Cherry Hill East like I talked about last year. This is a security camera protecting over close to 2,000 students, and it's broken. And I heard of broken cameras in the front because one of my friends tried to get copies of a car accident, and that didn't occur. Let alone that we don't even have enough cameras at Cherry Hill East. We have about a dozen cameras, and the average school should have, the average high school should have 30 to 40, to sometimes 50 cameras. How many does Union City have? They have 167 at their high school. Yes, it's a new high school. It is not acceptable. I don't know what's going on inside the school, but I can speak behalf of that. So what is the answer? Well, you still have a chance to save your school security. Yes, your 16% school security, physical security, that I will keep saying day after day after day. You have till May 14th. I checked with the school administration in the state. You have till May 14th to possibly invest 0.001% of your $200 million budget and do what's called a lease purchase. Yes, you could do a lease purchase for about the cost of what a principal gets paid and what Dr. Malash gets paid in an entire year, which would mean that you would have 100% physical security. I cannot believe that I have to come up here week after or every 2 weeks and talk about the same silly thing that right now you only have 16% of your school covered with physical security. It is a joke. Yet again, I say.
Good evening. My name is Naomi Lubkin. My address is 404 Longstone Drive in Cherry Hill. I've been a resident of Cherry Hill for 31 years. I had 3 children go through the schools. They're now 30, 29, and soon to be 28. 13 years ago, I was donating gallons of paint for Cherry Hill East for their theater. 5 years ago, I offered to donate construction paper to Sharp. They said, well, we don't need it. I don't understand this. My daughter, and I have a special feeling about special needs. My son actually worked with the Castle program. And although I didn't know any specifics, I knew they had a special protocol for handling students and whatnot, and then a debriefing, this kind of thing, which was recommended, which was asked for. My daughter needed an evaluation. She had been sick, and since you only do, at that time you only did it 1 time a year, she couldn't have it. So they kind of piecemealed things together. I hope that's not a process now. So if someone becomes ill in October, November, something like that, or January, you can't do it. What is it, IEP? You can't do it on it. I hope that that's responsive to every student, no matter when they get sick. Now, so that's a special needs thing. I think we really, really have to look at it. I don't know why we're seeing more of this, the need, but we have to address it. Now, security. I cannot believe what I am seeing here. You are educators. Would you go forth with a program to teach students without researching it, gathering the data? I mean, I look at the educators as doing this. Gather the data, interpret it, see what should be implemented. And that's not being done with security. I'm a taxpayer and I vote, and I don't like this. I want security to be for these children. They're my children in a way. But this has to be improved. This is very dangerous, what you're doing here. And you're showing us as educators, you're implementing programs, and then you're going to study it, and I'll be taxed more. I don't mind being taxed more to save the kids, to protect the kids. I would like to know also if it seems to me that Ms. Sugars, because of the past experience with her, maybe she has been the person advising on security matters. However well-intentioned, you need to have the proper people. And if I don't think the bill should, or the budget should be passed, if you're going to do this backwards, in my opinion. So anyway, thank you.
Ms. Lubkin, if you give Mrs. Wilson your contact information, I can certainly follow up with you. Mrs. Wilson's over at the side table.
Ben Ovadia, 100 Roanoke Road. Yes, Dave's my neighbor. Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Nothing too outlandish today. 5561, obviously that's been, I don't know, first reading, second reading, somewhere in the process. Maybe it's a policy, I don't know. But what I hear Cherry Hill or CHESEPTA saying essentially is, are we really sure that all of the restraints are being reported as is per the policy? And second, if there's a pattern for some students of repeated restraint, are deeper issues being looked at? I think those are both valid, interesting. I heard Dr. Malash say he's going to look at those comments, so that sounds good. Is it Malash or Malosh? Malash. Malash, everyone. Malash.
Malash. My grandfather was a French Canadian.
I didn't want me to be at a BOE where it wasn't mentioned, at least the teacher contract is obviously up this year. I think it's an important issue. I know no one here wants it to be a controversial issue, as does probably no one on this side, whether we arm them or not. But I mean, definitely getting the contract kind of settled. It's been a crazy year, and a lot of media and it's been a crazy year. And then the third thing I would say is, I mean, for the last speaker, I think there is something somewhat troubling about the timeline. I don't think it necessarily means everything has to stop, but I think certainly getting a detailed report from security, this community thinks about security differently than it did 6 months ago. There's no doubt about that. The issue of physical security and really like preventing people from coming in, that's really not, I remember when PTA kind of got thrown out of the schools post maybe Sandy Hook, but it's just like from then on you had to kind of ring the doorbell and announce who you were. Before that, that was unheard of. It's clearly changed, so the community perception of like what you should do is clearly different. But I think a full assessment, which I think is not being done now, is a good idea. And then somehow that has to be shaped into something that's implemented. And it's a moving target, which is complicated. I mean, you have a complicated job. But in one sense, I mean, there is something kind of troubling about, tens of millions of dollars on an assessment we're sort of going to get now. But anyway, I mean, you all do very important, big, complex stuff. But that's something I would kind of tuck away. One of the things that will be interesting to see is what people really want going forward. I think that's something that deserves some careful study, because as public opinion changes, I mean, there is no, like, this is what you do for security. It all depends. I was telling kind of a story to my family about how you could ensure security. I mean, it's not pretty, right? You could just, handcuff everyone coming into the school and, triple check them, and once they were, sort of clear them. I mean, there is a point at which we don't want to go. So I just think it's a conversation not to end, but to really keep going. And that's it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Dr. Meloche.
I do just want to follow up a little bit about security and the ongoing security discussions. Safety and security, and you've heard me say it, those of you at the table and the folks in the audience, and our staff, safety and security is our primary responsibility, right? Learning is secondary, and our kids do really well learning in terms of what goes on. The discussion about safety and security in schools is an evolutionary discussion. What we discuss today is different than we discussed, as somebody talked about 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, right? There's an evolution of what those needs are, and there's also a shift in what the perception of needs are. When we did the ribbon cutting at Barclay in November, and go back 8 months prior to that, when we talked about doing the job and the job approved and bid the job out, that went through, that was literally the culmination of 5 years worth of work or so that took place in Cherry Hill. Right, so there's a piece about what do we look like, what do we look at in terms of security, who weighs in on where that is. I'll tell you, security vestibules are something that the department, that the state recommends. Right, just the latest legislative update that came through from NJASA that goes through from the Department of Education. One of the recommendations from the Department of Ed is a security vestibule on schools. Right, we know that the primary area of focus that we have in building security is limiting access and making sure that the children who are in the school and the staff who are in the school are safe. What does safe mean? What does safe look like? That's an ongoing discussion in terms of what's there. Again, the Barclay design came through, Mrs. Sugars will tell you, when she started with us in July of 2016, we were talking about security vestibules. She certainly brought an area of expertise because of work that had been done. We have Cherry Hill Police, who's been involved with us with the security walkthroughs and their input. We have the engineers and the architects. Again, it's about access to a school and what does that mean in terms of limiting access. The security vestibules we find have been best practice. It's what's recommended to us, not just here in South Jersey, but in New Jersey and throughout the country. About access to schools. Who do we allow to come in? Are there lots of things that we can do to limit access? There are incredible things that we can do to limit access, and there's all kinds of buildings, from ones that are wide open to prisons that limit access, and what does that look like for people that come through that door? We are a school, right? We are a learning institution, and again, safety and security is our primary responsibility. Cameras and camera systems are important. Lots of things are important in terms of what's there. There's a discussion that we have as we build based on who we are, what we have, and what we're doing to provide for the children. Again, an ongoing discussion. One of the things you'll continue to hear us say, as especially go through the next 5 months, if we want to make these continued enhancements in security, there are things to do. One of the most important things is the adoption of the referendum in October, right? Dr. Dickinson went through 1.7 million square feet. There are 19 schools in our district. Are there priorities that we will include in that referendum? There absolutely are. The foundation of the referendum, as we look at questions, will be on safety and security. Numbers to go through, and people, the other thing that I will tell you, right, is people throw numbers out there about what it would cost to do something, and what's enough. Are 5 cameras enough? Are 10 cameras enough? Are 100 cameras enough? Depends upon what you want to film and what that looks like in terms of passivity and what you can look like after and what you can look at afterwards. We use those people. And yes, we're contracting with Ronin Security. That company will be coming through. You know, that'll be a formal process. People have asked, will we release the report? We will not release that report to the public. There's information that will come through and recommendations that we make about security that will not be able to be made public. Again, our responsibility is the safety and security of the kids in the district. We will talk about recommendations, we will go through and discuss what it is, but the report will not be released to the community. It's just not safe. It's much in the same thing as some of y'all have heard me talk in before. We've talked about safety and security, about evacuation sites for children. We have multiple evacuation sites for all of our schools. I won't tell you where they are. I won't. That's my responsibility to know that. There are folks that know where they are for each one of the schools. They have an area of responsibility. There are things that we go through with the administrators we don't necessarily talk with all the teachers about. There are things that we go through with the teachers that we don't necessarily talk with all the kids about. Again, our area of responsibility in terms of what we are doing and who we are. I applaud the people that want to continue to be involved in the security discussions. It is a huge piece of what we're doing and where we are. The discussion about what does it mean to feel safe, what does it mean to be safe, is part of that ongoing discussion. Right? There's statistics that have come out. Schools statistically are safer today than they ever have been. Statistically, schools are safer in 2018 than they ever have been in terms of things that go on in the schools, fights, violence, all that kind of stuff to go through, right? And we will continue to enhance that. Our children, the most important part of our community are our children. They are. We take that responsibility incredibly seriously, and we'll continue to do so. So again, folks that are involved in it, I applaud your involvement. Please continue to be involved, but please, this is not an us versus them. This is the answer. And if you don't want this answer, you want kids to be hurt. There is an in-between when we have this discussion. There's an in-between about where we are going and what we are doing.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. So we're going to go into closed session, and somebody will make a motion.
I make a motion to go into closed session to discuss attorney-client privileges. We will not be voting on anything, so we will come back into public, but we will not be voting on anything after that. So we need a second. Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack.